Welcome to Mysterious America with your guide. I'm Alex Bond. Hi. Happy Saturday, or whatever day you happen to be listening to this. As these will be archived, you will be able to see all the shows before too much longer. Whatever you do, don't roll that video yet, okay? Hold that back. We will explore on this show underreported, non-reported stories of great relevance and a few of the possibilities that could result from all of this. Our main story today is a look at a group of large stones. I've already got some of them behind me here. We'll go into in more detail shortly. These stones were carefully cut and placed into a formation with words in 8 known languages on 4 16-ton granite blocks. These words are for the future of mankind, as the financial forces behind the construction of this monument clearly believed our present civilization was not one that was going to last too terribly much longer. They call them the Georgia Guidestones. They're near a town called Elberton, Georgia. You can go see them yourself anytime. There's no great fences, gates. It's in a farmer's field, 700 feet off the highway. The people that built them and why were questions I asked when I visited them in 2002. Prior to that, in a magazine that I published in 1998 called The Probe, I wrote an article on it long before anybody in any journalistic circle I knew really took notice of this event. The structure was built in 1981. It was completed in 1981. There's a real unusual story to it. We'll get into that in just a moment. Others that have talked about these have basically been attempting to pacify the public as to the meaning of these great stones. But today we'll examine the instructions for the next civilization, who will grow after this one has somehow been destroyed or vanished. The Georgia Guidestones will be coming on after the break. But first, a look at how you can play a part in Mysterious America. The phone number is right below, 314-714-4200. We are taking callers. So if you have questions about this or some of the other great news stories that are not being covered, we certainly would like to hear from you. Also, there are ways to go ahead and email. You can email here at iWatch Radio to patrick@iwatchradio.com. All right. As many of you figured it out, I'm sure by now, the mainstream press has become relatively dysfunctional as a major source of news. There's a lot of it that doesn't seem to make the headlines. Yes, they put together a great product, but objectivity, with all the ingredients you need to make an informed decision? Well, in the 1980s and early 1990s, as the management of the news bureaus faded away, the entertainment division took over the news. And that's why it's much more entertainment-oriented, scandal-oriented, and emotion-driven. So that's why we have what we have today. That's the short version. We'll go into a longer version later on. Today, it's all about managing your perception of a given problem or news story. The sheer arrogance, of course, goes way beyond that. I just wanted to give you a couple of stories here from various authors. There was a FBI agent by the name of Gary Aldrich, well-respected in the Clinton White House, and he wrote a book called Unlimited Access. If you get a chance to pick it up, I'm sure you can find it in any used bookstore or order it new if you like. Nonetheless, he told about some of the inside pressures on other agents as they did attempt to testify during the infamous Travelgate fiasco, where Hillary Clinton was involved in attempting to get some of her people to take over positions of some of the more experienced travel people that were in the White House at the time. One of them was Billy Dale, and an FBI agent named Dennis testified on the behalf of Billy Dale. He then was acquitted of all the charges, probably as a result of some of the testimony of this FBI agent. Dennis eventually would face the full wrath of Craig Livingston of the Clinton White House staff. Dennis claimed all he could do was tell the truth. Livingston actually blew up at him. The truth, he says, Dennis, don't you know what the truth is? It's relative. Your testimony was your version of the truth. Truth is whatever you want it to be. That's an official explanation of what truth is. It also happened under the Bush administration. In James Bowman's book, Media Madness, he told of a Wall Street Journal former reporter, Ron Suskind, who wrote in the New York Times Magazine, of a conversation he had with an unnamed senior advisor. This unnamed senior advisor lectured him after he said they were part of a reality-based community. They believe that solutions emerge from your judicious study of discernible reality. Sounds pretty good, right? That would make sense. However, This official says, we're an empire now, and when we act, we create our own reality. So this again indicates that reality is something that is now believed to be managed or spun or as propaganda in the old days is what it was called. And of course, the fact that it was an unnamed senior advisor. The New York Times now specializes in giving credibility to unnamed and unknown sources. So that definitely demotes them down from the status they once held. Another way to manage information is through labeling. One of the favorite techniques is to set up an imaginary person or group. You will rarely get any actual names in this group unless one of them acts like a tyrannical loon. This group or person is what is known as a straw man. It's a legal definition also. You'll find it there too. But a straw man can be anyone. You, me, it doesn't matter if they create an identity for you. Let's say you call them the blah blahs. Well, they will say the blah blahs think this, or they will not believe that. They will say they believe this because they will always give you an all-knowing smile and a chuckle and say, well, the blah blahs don't know what they're talking about. We've been doing this for 30 years, and these people they just don't know what they're talking about. Well, the blah blahs today are called conspiracy theorists. How often do you hear anyone actually cite a real quote, have an interview with an accomplished researcher, or even mention a pertinent fact that counters their own? Well, by citing this conspiracy theorist, what they've done is create that straw man, and they can have them say anything they want. Often mentioned, but not by name, rarely interviewed by mainstream media, and the real controversial books, of course, end up being printed by smaller publishers. This is the land of those today that have questions. Sure, sometimes both sides get a little out of hand. There's no doubt about that. The short story is that you, the general public, are not served very well by the blockage of vital information, by constant denial. One of the stories that I saw on the news years ago was an interview between Sam Donaldson and Dick Morris. Of course, I'm sure you've seen Dick Morris on some of the other television shows he's been on. And Sam Donaldson is revered as being a high reporter of great investigative prowess. Well, he was interviewing Dick Morris, and during this time, this was when Dick Morris was being let go from his duties with the Clinton White House. Dick, of course, was not very happy about that, and he did say, not once, but twice, after all I've done for Clinton, I really saved his, well, let's just say his behind. After everything I've done for Clinton, I've saved his behind twice now. And he said this twice. Donaldson never followed that up with the logical question, well, what do you mean by that? Totally ignored it, did not want to hear what Morris had done. And that remains a mystery today. Nonetheless, there are many questions, and the people that are asking the questions should be allowed to ask them. Yeah, of course, that's always something that can be debated, but what is a good question? Well, in school we're told there's no such thing as a bad question, so maybe there's something to that. What we're going to do right now, we'll take a look at some of the news stories that have been in the headlines before we go to a break and come back with the Georgia Guidestones, and also a little bit about next week's show, too. And don't forget, there is that phone number, 314-714-4200, for anybody that would like to call in or email. You can do that, too, at patrick@iwatchradio.com. So if you have any questions about some of the things that we're talking about here, or can add a little bit to it, come on down. Taking a look at some of the news shorts here from Mysterious America. Of course, we know the Obama administration has quietly floated a transportation authorization bill recently that would require a study. Now, this is what they normally do. It's a procedure. You require a study to see if it's something that could float, see who salutes, run up the flagpole, see who it salutes, or see who salutes. This study is to find a way to tax automobile drivers on how many miles they actually drive. An updated draft of this legislation was available on a Transportation Weekly. You could look that up if you like. Google that, Transportation Weekly. Nonetheless, this is the draft. But now the spin from the White House. Well, according to a spokesperson, Jennifer Psaki, this is not an administration proposal. She said it's an early working draft proposal that was never formally circulated within the administration. Hold on, the spin goes on and on. Does not take into account the advice of the president's senior advisors, economic team, or cabinet officials, and does not represent the views of the president. Does Anybody actually believe that? It came from the administration, but it didn't come from the administration. So I guess they want it both ways. Well, perhaps it was run through one of his czars. Remember, he's got, over 18, maybe 20 czars, each with a staff of its own. So who knows? Might be an end-around play. And, of course, Ben Bernanke had that politically correct press conference not too long ago. In a statement following the meeting, the Fed said it would finish its $600 billion bond buying program in June as scheduled and repeated its plans to keep interest rates low for an extended period. At least that's what they said. Bernanke admits this is a relatively slow recovery. You can identify reasons for that, he said. The credit factor is one. Another very important factor is that this was triggered by a bubble in the housing market. Again, not taking responsibility for the Federal Reserve's part in the housing bubble when they allowed the interest rates to go down and the banks to loan the money and forced banks to take the money from the Fed to get out. There was a 60 Minutes article with the head of the Bank of America, who is no longer the head of the Bank of America, and he blatantly admitted in a meeting, he was told by Bernanke that he was going to take the $25 billion or he would not be employed in the future. So this was something the Fed does not take responsibility for, although they did help trigger the housing problem. Nonetheless, we are now seeing higher oil prices and other things. The combination of high employment, high gas prices, and high foreclosure rates is a terrible combination, and he does admit that he knows a lot of people are having a tough time. And of course, we all know about what happened with Osama bin Laden. Osama is now dead, and the long form of his birth certificate has been released. The questions, though, remain about Pakistani officials still claim they didn't know Osama lived near a police station and a military academy, and they still appear to be somewhat surprised. Incredible, but true. How can that be? Well, more questions. The photos of Osama's assassination, while gruesome, have been taken out of the media mix once again because the manufactured fear of upsetting radicalized Muslims who already appear to be pretty upset. So I don't know what the purpose of that is other than just playing politics. During his campaign, Obama was confronted with a question about why he did not place his hand over his heart during the presentation of the American flag again and again and again. He said he did not want to upset Muslims. So when it comes to a choice between Americans and Muslims and who to upset, that's yet another question. Oh, the Mexican Central Bank. Let's move on to another interesting bit of financial news. The Mexican Central Bank purchased 100 tons of gold. Do the math on that. What an ounce is, 16 ounces to a pound, 2,000 pounds to a ton. Well, you can figure this means a whole lot of money. This is the latest in a large series of gold purchases made by emerging market economies around the world. China, Russia, India have recently bolstered their reserves with gold. Recently, there was a conference called the BRIC. It stands for Brazil, Russia, India, and China. And they determined the faltering U.S. dollar no longer can be trusted and used as it was in the past. This will have a great impact on our economy, too. That means our dollar will still drop further, and the cost of your goods and many services will continue to go up. That's kind of an illusion. It's really the dollar going down, and the rest of it's going up, of course. Do not rely on official definitions of inflation, as that definition has been modified over time to reflect items that are not included in inflation, like food and gas. So if you don't put those in there, you can keep a nice low inflation rate. Pretty nice. This doesn't, of course, change the bottom line for many living, breathing Americans. Oh, April hiring figures we're in, too. Washington released the hiring numbers for April. 244,000 people were hired. Of that number, the top hiring company, McDonald's hamburgers, 62,000 were hired. Minimum wage jobs, I would imagine. And there's a comet closing in on terra firma, also known as Earth. It's called Elenin, and it does have some pretty good mass. Obviously, if we